sick loved one comes to our life, and then everything falls apart. So let's go back to the question, what are we going to do with our disappointment? Perhaps we could get some help from the Bible. And I want to direct to you with this 6-letter word from Psalm 23. You anoint my head with oil. And perhaps you're asking yourself, I'm not clear. How do this 6 word about oil got to do with my disappointment and hurt in life? Do you see the connection here, brethren? You anoint my head with oil. So if you don't see the connection, perhaps what I would recommend to you is that a little livestock lesson might help. A livestock lesson. I grew up from a farm back then in our old country. I grew up on a farm, and my grandfather raised, it's not sheep, but we call it water buffalo because they use it on the farm. In ancient Israel, a shepherd used oil for 3 purposes. In ancient Israel, a shepherd used oil for 3 purposes. Number 1, to repel the insects. Number 2, to prevent conflicts. As number 3 is to heal wounds. Do you know that back then, even now, even you and me, these bugs that crawls around and including mosquitoes, and my wife is, we have so many bugs at the house. Sometimes they try to go in the basement and it bothers us. But bugs can kill the sheep. Flies, mosquitoes, and ants can turn a summer into a time of torture for the livestock. For example, you consider those nose flies, for example. If they succeed in depositing their eggs into the soft membrane of the sheep nose, the eggs become a worm-like larvae which drive the sheep crazy or insane. One shepherd explained that for relief from this agonizing annoyance, you know what the sheep do? The sheep will deliberately beat their heads against the trees or against the rocks or posts or booths. In extreme case of intense infestation, the sheep may even kill itself in a frenzied endeavor to gain respite from the aggravation. And so when a swarm of nosefly appears, the sheep panic. They run, they hide, they toss their heads up and down for hours. And they forgot to eat, and they're not able to sleep. The females stop milking, the lambs stop growing, the entire flock can be disrupted, even destroyed by the presence of few flies. So for this reason, the shepherd anoints the sheep with this oil. He covers their heads with an oil-like repellent, and the fragrance keep the insects away and keep the flock at peace. You know that some of us even use it in summertime. Avon, Avon, skins or so, they put new skins to keep the mosquitoes away. Just an example. But in ancient Israel, the shepherd used an oil-like repellent. And you notice, the shepherd will notice 3 things that will happen to the animal as soon as the shepherd applied that oil. Immediate change in the animal's behavior. The animal all of a sudden, the aggravation is gone, the irritability of the animal is gone, and the sheep can now lie down and rest. Well, of course, we all know that they're at peace until the mating season, because in the sheep farm, when the mating season comes, all the female ones just strap their horns and try to be the macho in the yard, and then you will be challenged by the other one, and so they have a fight sometimes because they're trying to win the favor of the female. And so that's the 3rd reason why the shepherds use the oil. To prevent injury, the shepherd anoints the ram. He smears a slippery, greasy substance over their nose and head. This lubricant causes to glance off rather than cross into each other. I'm talking about those during mating season now, they still get hurt. However, it's not as so bad when they don't have that oil on their head. So most of the wounds of the shepherd trait are simply the result of living in a pasture. You know, the sheep, thorns, pricks, or rocks cut, or a sheep rub its head too hard against a tree. So the sheep get hurt. As a result, the shepherd regularly or often daily inspects the sheep, searching for cuts and abrasions. He doesn't want the cut to worsen. The shepherd doesn't want today's wound to become tomorrow's infection. So just like sheep, we have wounds, brethren. Just like the sheep, we have wounds. But our wounds are the wounds of the heart that come from disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. You agree?
Amen.
Wounds of the heart that come from disappointment in life. If we're not careful, these wounds will lead to bitterness. And so just like sheep, we need to be treated. Our scripture this morning in Psalm 100 verse 3 says that, it says, know that the Lord is God. It is He who made us, and not we ourselves. We are His people and the sheep of His pasture. Brethren, sheep are not the only one who need preventive care, and sheep are not the only one who need a healing touch. We also get irritated with each other. Yeah, right here in church, we even get irritated with each other. We butt our heads with each other too here in church. You believe that? Yes. We don't realize probably we butt our heads. And then we get wounded. Many of our disappointment in life begins as small irritations. The large portion of our problems or disappointments are not lion-sized attacks, but rather a day-to-day swarm of frustration and mishap and heartaches. You know, things like you don't get invited into a party, or you don't make the team, or you don't get the scholarship, or your boss doesn't notice your hard work, or your husband doesn't notice your new dress, or your neighbor doesn't notice his mess in the yard. You know, little things like that. And then you find yourself irritable. You become more miserable, more gloomy, and well, you know, more hurt and more hurt. And so, like the sheep, when we are experiencing these kinds of mishap in life, you don't sleep well. Do you ever experience that? You don't sleep well, you don't eat well. You may even hit your head against a person, maybe against your husband or your wife. You know, and it's amazing sometimes how hard-headed we can be with each other. Even here in church, it's amazing how can we be so hard-headed with each other. We disagree in many things. Some of our deepest hurt comes from butting heads with people. Oh, by the way, you know, brethren, today is a communion Sabbath here at West Park. And you know that what we do before we come here to partake of that emblem there? We do the foot washing. Yeah? Who among here hasn't experienced that foot washing? Who have never done it before? Do you know that foot washing is a powerful symbol? When we kneel before each other, as Jesus once did, and take someone's feet in our hands to wash them, we are taught important lessons of humility. Through this ceremony, this agreement between members or brothers, could be even family members, can be settled and wrongs made right. The water that is poured over our feet by our partner represents the spiritual cleansing and refreshing that comes when Jesus applies His blood to our lives. So remember the foot washing after our speech here, our study. We'll finish in about 5 or 10 minutes. Like the sheep, the rest of us, or the rest of our wounds come just from living in the pasture. Now I'm talking now the spiritual application here. We're living in a pasture.